Hey guys, Mark here, and today we're going to be taking a real close look at the cameras on the new iPhone SE and then comparing it to the cameras on the iPhone 11. First, let's get specs out of the way and then we'll jump straight into sample photos and videos. On the SE, there's a single 12 megapixel wide-angle rear-facing camera that shoots 4K up to 60 FPS or 1080p in 120 or 240 FPS. On the front of the SE is a slightly less impressive 7 megapixel shooter that shoots up to 1080p video at 30 frames per second. On the iPhone 11, however, we have two rear-facing cameras, a 12 megapixel ultra-wide as well as a 12 megapixel wide-angle. Both cameras shoot 4K up to 60 FPS, and on the front of the 11 is a 12 megapixel camera that can shoot video up to 4K 60 as well, which is a big upgrade over that SE. All right, with that out of the way, let's take a look at some videos. The sharpness, dynamic range, and colors are all excellent on the SE. It's easily one of the best cameras for video I've seen in a $400 phone. The sensor is large enough to get some natural looking bokeh with close subjects, and autofocus is nice and snappy. The stabilization is great too, as you can see from these walking shots. It's only when you put the SE side by side with the 11 that you start to see some of the differences. In some shots, the clips from the two phones look virtually identical, like this one. If I didn't have them labeled, you probably wouldn't even know which one was which. But in others, the 11 has a clear advantage. In this clip that's been slowed to about 50%, the road is completely blown out on the SE, but on the 11's clip, both Jen and the road in the background are mostly properly exposed across the frame. The video from the front-facing camera isn't bad either, it just kind of lacks the dynamic range and better stabilization of the iPhone 11. The other thing you're going to notice is that the 11's camera is much sharper because of that 4K. This can only shoot 1080p in 30 FPS. Meanwhile, on the 11, you have a better microphone as well as a full 4K 60 FPS capability. All right, photo time. Again, this phone was able to impress me right off the bat. Almost every single photo taken in daylight with this phone comes out perfectly. Autofocus nails focus every time. All of the photos are nice and sharp with good dynamic range across the board, and colors come out very natural and accurate. Even the portrait mode on this phone seems to do well. If we zoom in about 300%, you can see that it isn't perfect as it does blur a little bit of Jen's hair here, but overall it does an amazing job for a camera that doesn't even have a depth sensor. Comparing it to the 11, the SE holds its ground with only a few minor differences. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up pictures on my computer is that the SE tends to have a bias towards warm tones. In this Pier 10 picture, you can clearly see that the SE took more of a warmer picture than the 11 did. I prefer the SE's tone here, but the 11 was definitely more accurate. The other thing I noticed is that the 11 does a better job with reining in the highlights. In the SE's picture of this Newfoundland dog, the sky is blown out just a little, while the 11's camera was able to capture the sky more accurately. Also worth noting is that you can see my finger a little in the SE's picture. And that's actually a bigger issue than you might think. Because the SE's camera is physically closer to the frame of the phone and doesn't have a big camera bump, it's actually pretty easy to accidentally stick your finger into the shot when you're taking photos. The SE also seems to have a bit of an issue with lens flaring here and there, but that's fine because I actually kind of like the photo from the SE more than the 11 because of it. Again, portrait mode is doing a great job here, but the SE warms up the image a little more than it should. No big deal. I think the biggest issue with the SE in terms of the camera performance is the lack of a night mode. Photos taken in less than ideal scenarios come out pretty poorly compared to when you use the night mode on the iPhone 11. The lighting has literally not changed at all between these two photos. The 11's night mode is just that good. The reason these two cameras have the differences in color, dynamic range, and stabilization is pretty simple, but it's also kinda complicated. The camera that's in the SE is the exact same camera that's in the iPhone 8. We know this because, as I mentioned in my previous video about the iPhone SE, the guys and gals over at iFixit took apart the SE and compared it to the camera in the 8, and they were nearly identical. They actually put the camera from the iPhone SE into the iPhone 8 and vice versa, and both phones actually worked exactly the same way. The only way that the SE's camera is able to compete with the iPhone 11's is because the SE is able to take advantage of the same image processing pipeline from the A13 Bionic as the 11. So the reason the SE's camera is almost as good as the 11's camera isn't because of the actual camera itself, it's because of the processor. Weird, huh? If you want more SE photos to look at, feel free to check out my Instagram or my Twitter, where I'll be posting more sample photos as well as a few SE observations from my time using the phone. I'll leave links in the description below where you can check those out. And if you found this video helpful at all, hit that like button and subscribe to support my channel. And as always, have a great day.